Turkey doesn't need to pick a side because it controls the map, one set of straits, one coastline on the Black Sea, one army so large that NATO cannot talk seriously about Europe's southeastern flank without talking about Ankara. And now, Turkey is moving again. By the end of this video, you'll see why this is not just another alliance headline. It is a power shift inside NATO itself. The easy version of the story says Turkey is a difficult ally, too close to Russia for some Western capitals, too independent for Washington, too transactional for Brussels. But that version misses the bigger truth. Turkey has spent the last few years turning geography into leverage, leverage into military relevance, and military relevance into bargaining power. The real move is not that Ankara is suddenly becoming pro-NATO again. The real move is that Turkey is making itself impossible to route around. Look at what is happening on NATO's frontier. Reuters reported in January 2026 that Turkey plans to deploy fighter jets to Estonia and Romania under NATO air policing missions, with a 4-month rotation in Estonia from August to November 2026 and another in Romania from December 2026 into 2027. That matters because Estonia sits on Russia's border, while Romania looks straight into the Black Sea war zone. In plain English, Turkish fighters are not staying in the background. They are moving onto the alliance's nervous edges. And this is not some one-off symbolic visit designed for nice summit photos. NATO announced back in late 2023 that fighter jets from Belgium, France, Germany, Poland, and Turkey would take up air policing duties on the alliance's eastern flank, while Allied Air Command's own archive recorded Turkey's deployment of fighter jets to Romania for NATO air policing. So the pattern is already visible. Turkey is expanding its military footprint on the eastern flank step by step, sortie by sortie, rotation by rotation. That is how influence really grows inside alliances, not through speeches, through presence. There's also a human face to this shift. In Kosovo, one of NATO's most enduring missions, the current KFOR commander is Major General Özkan Ulutaş of the Turkish Army, who assumed command in October 2025. That alone tells you something important. Turkey is not just providing hardware or hosting meetings. It is putting Turkish officers into positions where alliance credibility, regional stability, and command authority meet. Ankara is no longer arguing for relevance. It is exercising it. This is where the phrase second military power in NATO stops sounding like a cliche and starts sounding like a warning. NATO and Reuters-backed reporting both describe Turkey as possessing the alliance's second largest army after the United States. Defense News and NATO's own media have repeated the same point. That does not automatically make Turkey the second strongest military in every category. Poland is surging. Britain and France still matter enormously in air and naval power, but manpower, mobilization culture, geography, domestic defense production, and operational experience still make Turkey a power center inside the alliance, not just a participant at the table. And when Ankara says it is important, it is increasingly backed by capability. Reuters reported in June 2025 that Turkey backed NATO's new 5% defense spending goal, and that a Turkish defense ministry source said the country already exceeds the older 2% threshold, ranks among the top 5 contributors to NATO operations, and is prioritizing a layered national air defense project called Steel Dome. That matters because real military power is not just troop counts. It is radars, missiles, maintenance, domestic industry, pilot training, spare parts, and the ability to sustain force under pressure. Turkey is trying to build all of that at once. Now, here is where the story gets dangerous and much more interesting, because Turkey's biggest strategic asset is not an army unit, or a fighter squadron, or a drone factory. It is a waterway, the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, the choke point between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, the gate to the war. Under the Montreux Convention, Turkey controls the straits and can limit the passage of warships during wartime or if threatened. That is not theoretical. Ankara invoked that framework after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and later blocked the transit of British mine hunter ships intended for Ukraine because, in Turkey's view, the passage would violate the convention. This is strategic gold, because whoever regulates naval access to the Black Sea is not observing the war from outside. They are shaping its geometry. That one fact changes the whole conversation. The Black Sea is not just another maritime space. It is Russia's southern military corridor, Ukraine's export artery, Romania and Bulgaria's frontline sea, and NATO's awkward naval problem. If non-literal allied navies cannot freely surge into the Black Sea in wartime, then the burden shifts toward the states already there, and above all, toward the state controlling the door. Turkey becomes less like a flank ally and more like a strategic switchboard. It can throttle escalation, preserve a balance, block certain naval moves, and force every major power in the region to think one step ahead. And Ankara knows it. That is why Turkey can sell Bayraktar drones to Ukraine, deepen industrial and reconstruction discussions with Kyiv, and still maintain diplomatic and economic ties with Moscow. Reuters noted in March 2025 that Zelensky called Turkey a partner in security guarantees, while another Reuters report the same month described Turkey as a NATO member with good ties to both Kyiv and Moscow, potentially useful in any future security arrangement around Ukraine. That balancing act frustrates almost everyone, which is precisely why it works. Turkey is not trying to be loved, it is trying to be indispensable. This is the contradiction at the heart of Turkey's rise. NATO needs Turkey more when the Black Sea gets hotter. Russia needs Turkey not to shut every door. Europe needs Turkey for defense industry, access, and regional containment. Ukraine needs Turkey for drones, maritime politics, and diplomacy. The United States needs Turkey because there is no serious southeastern NATO architecture without Turkish territory, Turkish forces, and Turkish consent. Ankara has built a position where every side needs something, and nobody gets the full package for free. That is not fence-sitting. That is leverage by design. Now, let's talk about Washington, because this is where the next chapter could get explosive. Reuters reported in March 2025 that Turkey and the United States wanted to remove obstacles to defense industry cooperation after talks between their top diplomat, with Ankara pushing for relief from CAATSA sanctions and a path back into the F-35 program. Reuters then reported in June 2025 that Erdogan said Turkey had not given up on the F-35 and had conveyed its wish to rejoin the program. And in December 2025, that the US ambassador to Turkey said ongoing discussions were underway, calling them the most fruitful in nearly a decade. But the wall is still there. Washington's position remains that Turkey cannot possess or operate the Russian S-400 system and return to the F-35 program at the same time. That is the Midscript Twist. The reset is real, but the contradiction is still live. Turkey wants back into Western high-end air power while refusing to fully surrender the Russian system that triggered the rupture in the first place. In March 2026, Reuters reported that Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said work was underway with the United States to lift sanctions before the US midterms, while acknowledging the political resistance around the issue. So Turkey is moving closer to the West, but on Turkish terms, and that means Ankara could still use the very possibility of a Western swing as a bargaining chip with both Washington and Moscow. This is why Turkey's current move inside NATO matters so much. If Ankara were simply reconciling with the West, that would be a diplomatic story. If it were simply hedging between East and West, that would be a familiar Turkish story. But what we are seeing now is more ambitious than either. Turkey is converting military deployments, command roles, defense spending, drone production, Black Sea gatekeeping, and sanctions diplomacy into a new status inside the alliance. Not just ally, not just spoiler, a power center. There is another reason NATO did not fully expect this shift to look so sharp. For years, many Western analysts treated Turkey as a problem to be managed. The Sweden accession drama, the S-400 purchase, friction with Greece, arguments over Syria, endless mistrust. But wars have a brutal way of clarifying what really matters. On the eastern flank, what matters are air bases, troop numbers, missile coverage, repair depth, industrial output, and maritime access. Turkey has all of them in forms NATO cannot easily replace. When the strategic environment hardened, Ankara's value rose with it, and the map keeps rewarding Turkey. Estonia and the Baltic Air Mission put Turkish jets closer to the alliance's exposed north. Romania and the Black Sea put Turkish aircraft closer to the alliance's exposed southeast. Kosovo puts Turkish command authority into a Balkan stability mission that NATO still cannot afford to neglect. Hosting the 2026 NATO summit in Ankara adds political theater to military reality. It all points in one direction. Turkey wants to be seen not as the alliance's awkward outlier, but as one of the few states that can operate across the Baltic, the Balkans, the Black Sea, the Caucasus, and the Middle East at the same time. And remember, presence is not only about combat, it is also about shaping the operating environment. Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria signed a Black Sea Mine Countermeasures Initiative in 2024, with the operation restricted to the 3 littoral allies. That detail matters. It showed how Turkey can help solve a military problem in the Black Sea while also limiting how outside powers enter the space. Ankara presented that as careful and impartial implementation of the Montreux Balance, which means Turkey can cooperate with NATO and still preserve a regional structure that keeps the Black Sea from becoming a totally open Western naval arena. Again, both sides, again, control. So what does this mean for NATO's next move? First, the alliance is likely to lean harder on Turkey, not less. Eastern air policing, Black Sea security, southeastern missile defense, Balkan stability, and southern neighborhood politics all become easier if Turkey is engaged. Second, Ankara's bargaining power with Washington rises as its operational value rises. The more NATO needs Turkish access and capability, the harder it becomes to keep Turkey permanently boxed out of top-tier Western defense arrangements. Third, Europe will keep trying to pull Turkey closer on defense industrial cooperation because Europe is rearming and Turkey actually makes things Europe needs, from drones to naval platforms to munitions support ecosystems. But there is a cost. A stronger Turkey inside NATO also means a more independent Turkey inside NATO. Ankara will not become a simple executor of alliance consensus. It will ask what it gets in return. It will use access as leverage. It will keep channels open to Russia where useful. It will resist arrangements that reduce its autonomy in the Black Sea. And it will continue trying to position itself as the broker that can speak to everybody because it fully belongs to nobody's script. For some allies, that will look uncomfortable. For Turkey, that is the point. Think back to Major General Özkan Ulutas in Kosovo, and to the Turkish F-16s heading for Estonia and Romania. One Turkish commander in the Balkans, one Turkish air presence moving toward Russia's edges, one state controlling the maritime valve of the Black Sea. This is not random activity. It is the outline of a strategy. Turkey is placing itself where NATO is most vulnerable and where Russia is most constrained. It is moving into the spaces where maps matter more than press releases. And that brings us back to the opening line. Turkey does not need to pick a side because it controls the map. It controls the straits that matter. It fields one of the alliance's largest armies. It is increasing its footprint on NATO's eastern edge. It is talking to Washington about sanctions and the F-35 while keeping its own options open. It sells weapons to Ukraine while preserving ties with Russia. That is not indecision. That is a geopolitical business model. So no, the biggest Turkish move is not one deployment, one summit, or one sanctions negotiation. The move is that Ankara has made itself central to the most contested military space in Europe while convincing both NATO and Russia that losing Turkey would cost too much. That is why this matters. Not because Turkey suddenly changed sides, but because Turkey is learning how to profit from being the ground, the gate, and the hinge all at once. And if that continues, the next fight inside NATO will not be about whether Turkey belongs in the alliance. It will be about how much of the alliance now has to move around Turkey.